Hey there, folks. Welcome to another installment, the final installment for the 2023 regular season of the OU Insider Under the Visor pregame podcast. Parker Thune alongside Travis Davidson to preview a game that the Sooners have to win to stay in contention for the Big 12 championship. However, one of the unfortunate consequences of their back-to-back late season losses to Oklahoma State and Kansas is that they don't control their own destiny in the Big 12 championship race. Not only do they need to win this game on Friday at 11 a.m., but then they'll have to sweat it out on Saturday and hope that either Oklahoma State loses, which would be the easiest, most feasible option, or that Texas and Kansas State both lose. And Travis, I think the natural place to start here is with the quarterback conversation. I won't call it a controversy because that carries a different connotation these days. The quarterback conversation is what we're dealing with here because Dillon Gabriel obviously did not play in the second half against BYU. As we look forward to this game against the Horned Frogs, we kind of know the nature of the injury, even if we don't know the exact severity of it or Gabriel's exact status. OU is obviously keeping those details close to the vest. We know he didn't play the second half. Jackson Arnold did what he had to do to deliver the Sooners a road victory. Do you believe that we see Gabriel on Friday? Let's just start there.
I do believe that we see Dillon Gabriel. I think if he's healthy, it's the right move anyways. I know some people think that, hey, look, we didn't get the help that we needed last week with the Texas game and the Oklahoma State game, and those were probably the best odds for them to lose and slip up. So maybe you go with the freshman, right? Maybe you get some of those reps started now. I personally think you go with Dillon Gabriel if he is healthy. I don't necessarily think you need to announce it right away. You might as well go right up to, kickoff while Sonny Dykes is having to prepare for two quarterbacks. Although I don't think your preparation is much different. I think Dillon has more of a mental mastery of the offense, but I think Jackson can make all the throws. He's obviously a run threat, everything like that. So I don't think this is a situation where your preparation is like Baker to Kyler, where it's like, okay, we got one guy who can do one thing. We got one guy who can do something completely different. So I think if he is healthy, I think you do right by him and you do right by guys like Drake Stoops and some of the other guys who, it's their last game, and you start Dillon Gabriel.
Happy Thanksgiving to all of you, by the way. We're sitting here recording this on Wednesday night. It will go live on streaming platforms Thursday morning, so many of you will be listening to it on Thanksgiving. We appreciate you making us a regular part of your day or week, however frequently you interact with us at ouinsider.com. This podcast and every podcast is brought to you by Olipop, the soda that's good for you. Check them out at drinkolipop.com and use promo code CHAMPU20 for 20% off. Now, I want to rewind to Saturday, Travis, because I just got the opportunity to rewatch that BYU game last night alongside our man Brian Clinton. And Jackson Arnold held his own in the second half. But you could definitely tell he had his own distinct way of seeing the field as opposed to Dillon Gabriel. For instance, there were several plays that we noticed throughout the second half where based on the way that the play is unfolding, if it's 8 out there, he's looking for Drake Stoops on this play. Not quite the same process for Jackson Arnold. In most cases, Jalil Farouk was the guy that he was looking to fit the ball into more often than not. So how much stock do you put into that, the chemistry between a quarterback and a receiver, and who might have a bigger game depending on which quarterback does see action this Friday?
Oh, I think it's big time, right? That's why when Dillon got to campus, he put so much energy and effort and time into getting on the same page with the guys, not only just on the field, but getting around them, getting to spend time with them and understanding what they're like and just trying to familiarize yourself so much with them. So I think we saw it, like Spencer Rattler did it with Stogner, right? We saw that a ton. Caleb Williams did it with Marvin Mims and Mario Williams. a ton, right? Even you go back with Kyler and you got Lee Morris, right? That they obviously had a ton of history together. So I do put stock into, that bit of chemistry. But I also think that if a guy's open and you've got a good quarterback, you can put it on. So I don't think it's a situation where I do think Drake Stoops' ceiling in this game statistically is better with Dylan there. But I think that if Drake's open, then if Jackson were to play, that Jackson can get him the ball.
Going to give a 918 guy an opportunity to talk and brag on another 918 guy. And that would be Gentry Williams. The Sooners get him back this weekend, and it could not be much better timed because the last five opponents that the Sooners have faced have all leaned on the run to varying degrees. That's not going to be the case with this TCU program, especially if Josh Hoover draws the start, which we expect. They're going to throw it around. The Sooners have had vulnerabilities in the secondary that have been most conspicuous when Gentry has been on the sideline, and getting him back healthy for this game is going to be huge for the Sooners defensively.
Yeah, I mean, he's been fantastic when he's been in. We all know the big plays with him making a play on the ball with those interceptions. But when you look back at the BYU game, where we really struggled against run was corners could not get off blocks. Josiah Wagner very much struggled. He didn't even have spring here. He's a smaller guy already. He's going to be very good. But I just think he needs probably another year in the weight room to kind of get up and be able to get off those blocks. I think part of it was naturally some field conditions. I think we saw Danny Stutzman even a couple times slip a little bit and then not trust his footing. So that combined with kind of getting bodied by those wide receivers, I think was just an overall detriment to the defense. But Gentry Williams is a guy that he gets off blocks. He is strong. There's not a lot of wide receivers, in this conference, at least that we've seen so far, that have been able to just pin him down on the edges. We saw it obviously throughout the first of the season. He's blowing up guys in the backfield, tackles for loss. He's got them. And you see some corners just get walked down. He's not one of them. So, and also just the depth. I mean, when you've got guys, Kenai Walker banged up, and you've got Gentry banged up, and so you're having to go with Josiah Wagner. You got Makari Vickers banged up. You've got Woody Washington on the other side. And, I said last week, lungs is lungs. That I was wrong, especially on the Billy Bowman 100-yard return. I was flat out wrong on that. So it would have been nice to have that depth in a game where those guys were having to play at 4,500 feet, but getting Gentry at least back for a game at home, to hopefully let him put an exclamation mark on a season that had a lot of highs, and hopefully his career moving forward, he can be a lot healthier so the team can enjoy those highs much more.
We got a lot more to discuss on this version of the OU Insider pregame podcast. We're going to hit a quick word from our sponsors before we do. We got backfield, pass rush. We'll talk more about the secondary. We'll talk about the senior day festivities and how revealing those announcements or presentations, I suppose more accurately, may be in a year where we're still dealing with COVID eligibility exemptions. We'll get to all of that in just a moment after a quick word from our sponsors here. This episode of the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast is brought to you in part by Manscaped. Merry Ballsmas from our friends over at Manscaped. The holidays are approaching, and it turns out the perfect gift does exist. Who else to bring it down your chimney than the leaders in below-the-waist grooming? Keep calm and let your balls jingle this season with Manscaped's brand new Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, featuring the new Lawnmower 5.0. Look nice when you're going naughty by going to manscaped.com and use code OU Insider for 20% off and free shipping. Unwrap the gift of smoothness this season with Manscaped. Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate bundle for the man who deserves it all. Included in this special sack is the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, the Weed Whacker 2.0 ear and nose trimmer, Manscaped's liquid formulations, and 2 free gifts. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code OU Insider at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code OUinsider. Manscaped, get your jingle balls ready for the holidays. HelloFresh is a proud sponsor of the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast. With HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Folks, during football season, between podcasts, game coverage, and the recruiting trail, I don't have a ton of time to devote to cooking nutritious meals, but HelloFresh makes it easy. Hosting this holiday, HelloFresh Market has just what you need to please a crowd without the hassle, from photo-worthy charcuterie boards to mouth-watering desserts. The most wonderful time of the year is also the most delicious. Enjoy every bite of the holiday season with HelloFresh. Choose from over 45 weekly recipes and over 100 curated picks from HelloFresh Market. Just like always, HelloFresh's ingredients travel from the farm to your door, so you know they're fresh, and everything arrives pre-portioned so you can get right to cooking quick. Go to HelloFresh.com/OUinsiderFree and use code OUinsiderFree for free breakfast for life. One breakfast item per box while subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/OUinsiderFree with code OUinsiderFree. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Okay, Travis, so let's kind of work backwards there. Amongst the things that I mentioned, I actually want to start with the Senior Day festivities and what it might hold for Oklahoma, depending on who walks and who doesn't walk, right? Because and it doesn't always tell us everything. Drake Stoops walked last year. He ended up coming back. He's going to walk again on Friday. But if a guy doesn't walk on Senior Day and has the opportunity to, i.e. McCade Mathier last year, you have it on pretty good authority that he's returning to Oklahoma to use his bonus year. Now, I think the player that most are going to be on alert for is naturally the quarterback, Dillon Gabriel, because it's become a legit conversation, Travis. I think we all kind of took it for granted that he was going to be off to the NFL after the 2023 season. And now there are rumblings behind the scenes that maybe, just maybe, Gabriel does end up utilizing his 6th year anyway. How much of a wrinkle could that throw into things for Oklahoma in 2024 as they prepare to make the transition to the SEC? And ultimately, what do you feel like the outcome would be in that scenario?
Man, I don't know. I don't think Dillon Gabriel knows what the outcome would be. I don't think Jackson Arnold knows the outcome. I don't think Jeff Lebby knows what the outcome would be. I don't think Brent Venables knows what the outcome would be, because it would kind of be awkward. I mean, I don't know. Awkward, not in the way like, ooh, we can't talk about it, but awkward, just awkward fitting, right? Because the clean break is Jackson takes the reins next year. We have him for 2 years, maybe 3, and then Dillon goes off to the NFL, where I feel that he'll be late 3rd or mid 4th round type of pick. And, the argument for Dillon leaving is, man, you are a top 10 all-time passer now. You're top 5 in touchdowns all time. You've had some injury history, so maybe you don't want to get a year older into the draft and another year injured or something like that. I'm not sure your stock's going to get even higher. Like, I don't think a world exists where Dillon Gabriel plays himself into the 1st round next year. So I think the argument is, look, your stock's higher than it's ever going to be. You're never going to be younger than you are now. You're never going to be healthier than you are now. So pull the trigger. But if he does come back, if you're Brent Venables, how do you tell presumably the first team all Big 12 quarterback who's going to finish, I don't know, he'll get some Heisman votes, like some 5th, 6th, or 5th place Heisman votes, 4th place Heisman votes. Like he'll get some. How do you tell a Heisman contender that beat Texas, that is going to have, he's got, between rushing and passing, he'll finish with around 40-ish touchdowns to, minimal turnovers. How do you tell a guy, especially if we're living in a world where Jeff Lebby returns and Dillon's kind of the master of that offense, like, how do you say thanks, but no thanks. Can you say that? I don't know. What do you think, Parker?
Well, let me throw a scenario at you. And by the way, I think it's worth pointing out that if Dillon Gabriel were to return for his 6th year and were to stay healthy for the entirety of that 6th year, he would essentially have a very good chance to break basically every cumulative passing record that has ever been established in college football. He would have a chance to own all of those marks.
And I want to jump in here real quick because you brought that up. Dillon Gabriel played a COVID year where he played it shortened, and he played one of his years where he only played 3 games at UCF. He's played 10 less games than Sam Hartman, 9 less games than Bo Nix. Or I have those two flipped. Regardless, he's played at least 9 less games than both of those guys. And like he's played in 48 games, which is the equivalent of 4 regular seasons if you don't count the bowl games and postseason things like that. So yes, Dillon Gabriel has the opportunity to do it, but I don't want people to think it's just because he's had so many more games than everybody else. It's the fact that he's been prolific in those games.
That is true. So let me throw this scenario at you. I didn't anticipate we would be talking about this, at least not seriously, but it is now the final week of the regular season. The coaching carousel is going to start to spin. Jamie Chadwell, it's been reported today, is out of the running to be Mississippi State's next head coach, Travis. And Jamie Chadwell was the Vegas favorite for that job. The guy with the number 2 odds, none other than Jeff Lebby. Now, I don't believe that even if Jeff Lebby were to take another job, Jackson Arnold would go with him. I think he's got roots at Oklahoma. He's got enough reasons to stay. But if you're Dillon Gabriel, if there's a world where your offensive coordinator, the guy that you've rocked with for 2 years at Oklahoma, and I think just 1 at UCF, if I recall correctly. So you've had 3 seasons with this guy. You got a 6th year to use. You're not going to be taking all that high in the NFL draft regardless this offseason. And again, you have the opportunity to establish exclusive company in the ranks of prolific collegiate quarterbacks over the years and decades. You go with him to Starkville? Like that, I mean, is that on the table?
I think the odds of Dillon Gabriel following Jeff Lebby to Mississippi State are much higher than Jeff Lebby getting the job at Mississippi State.
Okay. So, I like that.
I don't think, and I've said before, I'll continue to say it. I think Jeff Lebby is going to be a head coach, like sooner rather than later. And I think OU knew that when they hired him. I think they knew Jeff Lebby is a guy that, has coaching in his family, who has that kind of upward trajectory that people would expect. And let's be honest, the Oklahoma offensive coordinator, you're going to be in that situation a lot, right? Like coordinators on either side of the ball at OU, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, like they're going to get head coaching looks. It's just part of being who you are. But I don't know what it is. Call it a gut feeling, but I don't think that Jeff Lebby is going to be the next head coach at Mississippi State. If he is, good for him, man. First head coaching gig is an SEC gig, and you get a quarterback. If Dillon were to go, you would get a quarterback to go with you. I mean, that's the Lincoln Riley all over again.
No,
you
man.
leave for a job and the quarterback follows you there. You all of a sudden have kind of a leg up. So
I think if Lebby were to go to Mississippi State, he would have Sooner fans' blessing much more so than Lincoln Riley ever did, especially because Zach Selman is the athletic director there at Mississippi State.
Right. But I don't think they have, I know that they were here at Oklahoma at the same time, but I think Jeff Lebby has a lot of other, like probably 100 closer relationships than Zach Selman. And I know that's the popular, right? Oh, crossover. That's why they would hire him. Like I personally don't feel that way. But with Jeff leaving, if Jeff were to leave and take an SEC job, what does that do to Joe John Finley? Does he follow him to be his OC?
Sure.
What does that
That's a
do
good point.
to Mike Hawkins, right? Who's a guy who's no legacy, but loves Jeff Lebby, was down to Bryles and Lebby in his recruitment. I know Mike Hawkins Senior obviously loves Jeff Lebby a lot, has a lot of faith in him. What is that? So if Joe John goes, if Mike Hawkins goes, what does that do to Devon Mitchell, right? Who's now best friend and tight end coach would then be gone. Like, it's just, I think if that move happens, then I think there's a lot more moving pieces at Oklahoma. Whereas I think if Jeff were to not get that job and get maybe I don't know, say Traylor takes the job at A&M and UTSA comes open, or I don't know, any other job that's not an SEC job or something. You get what I'm saying. If there's availability out there, I don't think there would quite be the shakeup.
Yeah. Well, and I guess in theory, it does make sense why Jeff Lebby's name is getting thrown around at Mississippi State. And I would venture to guess that he's either already interviewed or will interview, because with Zach Selman being a first-year AD, first time you got to make a hire, who are you going to go to? Well, you're going to go to who you know. And who Zach Selman knows, that is the folks at Oklahoma. And no doubt Jeff Lebby would get a strong rec from Joe Castiglione and most anybody else within those walls at Oklahoma, because the whole Art Briles fiasco aside, Jeff Lebby is very well liked and very well respected, regardless of the perception that some folks may have of him after that whole debacle. But
well, and of course, getting back to the state of Mississippi, where he was at Ole Miss and recruiting. Yes. I mean, I think it's just because we haven't mentioned it, I want to make sure that we do put it out there, that getting back to the state of Mississippi, if he were to, go to a place where he's a bit familiar, Mississippi State would check that box.
Yes, no question about that. Now, I just completely lost my train of thought. What was I about to pivot to? It was such a good thought, too. I had it all lined up. It was right there. And then, poof, it disappeared on me. But I guess let's reorient this game. Whatever I was thinking. Oh, you know what? Yeah, here's what it was. Brief sidebar. Who do you think the next head coach at Texas A&M is, since you brought that up?
Okay, I am of the belief that Texas A&M should they should prioritize hiring the right guy as opposed to the hot splash guy, right? Because people are saying, oh, well, why don't you just throw a bunch of money at Ryan Day? Why don't you throw a bunch of money at Lincoln Riley? Why don't you throw a bunch of money at Urban Meyer? Why don't you if you start with why don't you throw a bunch of money at, I think you're starting on the wrong foot, because I think A&M donors, just in my mind, and as they've been kind of painted, on message boards and on Twitter and things like that, and just by logic, right, is they have no problem paying. And at times it seems like they want you to know that they have no problem paying. Yep. It's almost an ego thing, right? Like, oh, we can write any check, just watch us. But like at a certain point, wouldn't Elko kind of wouldn't Traylor be a better fit? Wouldn't Fish from Arizona be a better fit? Wouldn't some of these guys maybe just go in there and be a good coach? Like, you don't always have to. They just did the splash with Jimbo, right? And they paid him gobs of money, and they gave him a raise, an extension, when they didn't need to. So that says to me, we're a little insecure. We're going to pay you because we can, because we have the money. And I think the issue there is, if you go and you pay somebody, you just got done paying the biggest buyout in sports history, you're going to have to go hire a guy. Say it's Ryan Day. You've got to pay Ryan Day's buyout. And then you've got to pay Ryan Day's contract. And who knows? Maybe then you've got to pay another buyout on top of it. And I know A&M's got a ton of money. But at a certain point, you've got to be tired of burning cash. You've got to be tired of it. Like, people want to say, if you did write that big check to buy out Jimbo, it's because you believe you can go get a home run hire. Well, the home run hire doesn't necessarily need to be a big name guy that you have to go pay $100 million just to get out of his current job. It can be a guy that you know what? Maybe he isn't flashy enough to keep around a lot of that 2022 class. It's not, it's not sexy enough. But man, maybe you want to just overhaul the culture. Maybe, just maybe, right? So I think they would be better off choosing from a pool of Elko, Fish, or Trailer than they would Urban, Ryan Day, or I don't know, Lincoln Riley or Deion Sanders. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you, I would have laughed at this assertion 24 hours ago, which was about when it first hit the message boards. But based on some conversations I've had today, I do think there's a good chance Ryan Day is the next head coach at Texas A&M, which is just wild. But yeah, again, to your point, Travis, it goes back to one of the old adages from Moneyball, right? General managers think in terms of buying players. Your goal shouldn't be to buy players. Your goal should be to buy wins. Similarly, Texas A&M, your goal shouldn't be to buy a coach. Your goal should be to win football games. And you can't buy culture, which is going to that's what's going to win you more football games than anything else in the long run. But you can lay the groundwork by starting with a coach that is culture oriented. And I think two guys that fit that bill really, really well are Jeff Traylor and Mike Elko. So again, I've been saying it all along, Travis. The sensible hire would be one of those two guys. I just can't trust A&M to make the sensible hire. So
right,
we'll see about it.
And in that situation, like I would rather have a hungry coach, right? Like a guy that's got his first big crack at a place like A&M in the SEC, but like big opportunity, big resources, all that, and then let me go earn my
like Oregon getting Dan Lanning.
Yeah, or like when Texas hired Sark, they didn't give him $10 million. You know what I mean? Like it was a situation like we didn't give BV $10 million. And that's the thing. It's like, let him go be hungry. If Jimbo knew he was going to get paid gobs of money if he got fired. And I don't want to assume anything about people's competitive nature or their effort, anything like that. I think human nature says, if I fail, just unbelievably wealthy and I don't have to do anything. If your punishment, the consequences of being bad at your job are that you get paid gobs and gobs of generational wealth and you're able to do nothing, there's maybe a lack of motivation at times to do certain things, but
sure.
I digress.
No, I think that's a great point. Okay. We got off track. That's my fault. Back to the game, back to Oklahoma and TCU. Now, we talked about the quarterback situation. We have not yet talked about the backfield. The Sooners got themselves an RB1 in Gavin Sawchuk. Man, 3 straight games over 100 yards. He's playing his best ball right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because at Kansas, we all kept saying, well, what more do we need to see? Tawee is the guy. What more do we? Nobody else should outsnap him the rest of the season.
You know what's actually hilarious is so many people were critiquing Jeff Lebby at the end of that Kansas game because they're like, why would you run Sawchuk? And now you fast forward to the BYU game and everybody's critique of Lebby at the end of the second half, or at the end of the first half, was, why wouldn't you run Sawchuk?
Yeah, it's, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But it's also like hot hand, right? Sawchuk got hot and he stayed hot, man. And over 100 yards. He's running so much tougher than we've seen. You remember that? I mean, that touchdown run that he took down the left side where he's got guys look like they're horse collaring him. He's getting out of it. That looks like a Tawee run.
It does. So it does.
That Tawee's not going to get faster. That people typically don't get faster at this age. But Sawchuk looked like he got a little tougher. Sawchuk looked like he got a little stronger, doesn't he? So with him running like that, it gives you a lot of confidence going into this week. But Parker, gives you a lot of confidence going into next year as well. I'm wondering I'm wondering, and I know it's getting way ahead of it, but I don't know what this says for Javonte Barnes's, week this week. If he gets any carries, what the bowl game looks like, what next year looks like with the number one tight end in the country coming in and Taylor Tatum, a physical monster, just an anomaly like Xavier
Number
Robinson.
one running back.
And number one running back. Sorry, I didn't realize.
I mean, you got the number one tight end too, but.
Oh, I don't know why I said that. I must have been moving to Xavier Robinson, just thinking big bodies, because Xavier Robinson, just a very unique type build coming in. And then Andy Bass, who all that dude does is score touchdowns. So, that's what I think that's going to be an interesting conversation to have in the offseason. But as far as it pertains to this game right now, man, Gavin Sawchuk's got to have a big day, right?
You would think so. And especially if the Sooners want to be able to control the tempo of the game. And I think that's going to be important. Like, and maybe I used the wrong word. Maybe not controlling the tempo, but controlling the flow of the game. For instance, I think this is especially pivotal in the early stages, right? Because common denominator across the board this year, when Oklahoma doesn't play well, it's typically because they got off to a slow start. And you let TCU get up on you by a score or two, and that offense gets clicking, and Josh Hoover is flinging the ball around the yard and building confidence. Yeah, then that might be a recipe for an upset. TCU's playing for bowl eligibility, Travis. They're going to have a little extra fire under their belly, if only for that fact. So, yeah, I expect a steady diet of Gavin Sawchuk. And it's wild, man. We came into the year figuring, it's going to be a two-headed monster. Sawchuk and Barnes all day, every day. Well, Sawchuk has lived up to the billing. It took him 6-7 games to do so, or to start to do so. But especially in the month of November, he's lived up to the billing. Barnes has just kind of been the odd man out. And admittedly, Venables has said he's not 100%, got a weird injury situation. But I'll tell you, man, I don't think you're keeping Taylor Tatum off the field entirely next year. Now, you see a ton of him? Maybe not. But I think he's going to have a role. And if he has a role, and Sawchuk is your bell cow, what does that leave for Javonte Barnes? That's a guy that's going to have a really, really real challenge ahead of him this offseason to reestablish that trust with the coaching staff to the point where they're willing to trot him out there and give him crucial snaps when those could otherwise go to Sawchuk or to a guy like Tatum.
Right. It'll be interesting to watch, but none of that will matter if our offensive line can't block. And what's going to be interesting about this game, Parker, is I think Big Sexy Jacob Sexton is going to start over Tyler Guyton again, and I believe Tyler Guyton is healthy enough to play. So, I mean, would this be the first time that a true sophomore would be starting over a healthy eventual first rounder that you can think of?
I can't recall another instance that mirrors that. And that the fact that Venables came out of his press conference Tuesday and said, yeah, that's more about Sexton than about Guyton. I mean, that just tells you all you need to know right there. Jake Sexton has legitimately been too good for them to keep off the field.
Well, it's a Caden Green situation, right? I mean,
yeah, sure.
True freshman Caden Green got the pancake of the week. I saw on OU social media on Gavin Sawchuk's touchdown run, had a nice pancake on a linebacker. They've got some young talent in that room, and I'm not sure you even go get Walter Rouse if Jake Sexton makes it out of the bowl game healthy. So, you've got guys like Jake Taylor, guys like Caden Green and Jacob Sexton. You've got Troy Everett there that came over that played center. He's kind of been patchwork guy, right? But his build is more center because he's not as big as some of the other guards. But I do think you'll see some portaling from Bill Bedenbaugh for the interior of the line. But this offensive line's got to have you excited, especially the two Jakes and Caden Green. And I think I think these running backs are going to enjoy running behind them.
Okay, so let's talk about the pass rush. Obviously, when you have a pass-oriented opponent like TCU, it is paramount that you provide pressure. And you may have a different opinion than mine, Travis, but and I think I said it on the post-game podcast, a lot of the same things that Brent Venables said on Tuesday about his pass rush. They're getting there. They've provided constant pressure. They're just not getting home, and there's a variety of reasons for that. You know, I remember during the rewatch Tuesday night, seeing one play where Danny Stutzman just comes unscathed through the line, and Jake Retzloff has the presence of mind to basically backhand the ball to a blocking running back so as to avoid an intentional grounding call. When a lot of quarterbacks are just like they're looking at Danny Stutzman bearing down on them, and they're accepting their fate. Like they're just taking the sack there. So the Sooners, the Stutzman's sack, the one that he did have on Saturday, was their first sack since the UCF game. I don't necessarily think that's indicative of the way that they've played in the front seven as far as the pass rush is concerned. And I do think if TCU is sending 4 and 5 men out on routes instead of 3 to leave 7 in protection, the way that teams like Oklahoma State and Kansas and BYU for that matter did, then that probably bodes well for Oklahoma's odds to get after Josh Hoover and disrupt the game that way.
Yeah, and I'm typically a guy that discounts sacks as a stat a little bit as it pertains to pressure, because when you're getting in the backfield, like we're one of the nation's best in tackles for loss. We're getting through when they are running the ball, to the outside. We're getting there. So I think if you're doing those things, then naturally, if you're given enough time, you'll have sacks. But I also don't think we're the only team in the country that people are playing max protection against. I don't think we're the only team in the country that quarterbacks are throwing the ball quickly against. So the lack of production when it's to this rate is a little bit concerning for me, to be honest. So hopefully, again, pass heavy. I hope this is an opportunity where we can light them up a little bit, but I would be lying to you if I wasn't a little bit, disappointed in the sack number, while also understanding that sack number isn't that great of a tool.
All right. Final word. What is the key for Oklahoma to win the game on Friday?
I think it's limit explosive plays. TCU's got athletes. They didn't have 30, 40 people leave to the NFL. They had a lot, but they still have some athletes there. They've got some skill position players, and you just can't get hit for the big plays so many times. And it's really weird, Parker. I feel like we play better. Like I feel like the defense plays better, like man to man, than they do when they just drop everybody. Like for some reason, I feel like we just lose a lot of people when we drop 7, 8 guys just in the gap. I feel like we've seen it a lot this year. So I think if you've got to be sound on the back end, because the way they throw it, and they're going to throw it a lot, you just have to limit the explosive plays. You can't give up the 50, 60-yard touchdowns, because that gives him confidence, like you'd said. And it kind of takes the wind out of your defense. It takes the wind out of the home crowd. We saw that happen against Iowa State on those long touchdowns. I mean, it's just limit explosive plays, and I don't feel like TCU can make enough of them to kind of hit singles down the field as opposed to hitting a home run.
Yeah, and this may sound counterintuitive, but I think if Oklahoma defends the run well, that bodes well for their chances on Friday, because this secondary has been incredibly opportunistic and has generated turnovers consistently throughout the season. So I trust that they are going to make Josh Hoover pay for an ill-advised throw or two and be able to help Oklahoma win the turnover battle. Where OU has struggled unfailingly this season is when they have not defended the run well. And we did not expect that BYU was going to rush for 200+ yards against Oklahoma last week, but it happened. So all I'm saying is, TCU doesn't run the ball very well. Neither did BYU. Take that facet of the game away from TCU, and I think that's your recipe for victory. I have the Sooners 38-28 in this game. Travis, what say you?
I think given the opportunity that Jeff Lebby will try and get the ball to Drake Stoops and try and get Dillon Gabriel as many yards as he can to continue to climb up those ranks, whether he's coming back or not, he has the opportunity to climb some of those ranks, right? So I think that it ends up being 42-30, which is barely a cover as the 9.5 that I saw recently. But I think he loads up Drake Stoops, who currently is one off the lead for Big 12 receptions, and he's tied for the lead in Big 12 touchdowns. I think he loads him up with another double-digit catch performance and another triple-digit reception performance.
All right, folks. Thanks for riding with us. That's a wrap on the OU Insider Under the Visor pregame podcast. 11 a.m. kickoff on Black Friday between the Sooners and the Horned Frogs. We'll be there wherever you are watching it from. Excuse me. Have a tremendous game day a day early. We'll talk to you on the other side.